Hello and welcome to Sarasota Film Festival's Spotlight Series. Today we're here with
Bradley Battersby, director of The Lucky Six.
Bradley. Tell us a little bit about the plot of The Lucky Six.
Well, it's about a group of employees who go in together and buy a lottery ticket in a lottery pool, and they end up winning. Then we cut 5 years later, and there's been improprieties found, and they're all brought back to try to deal with the fact that perhaps one of them cheated. And that one person has now passed away, so there's no being able to tell for sure if that person cheated or not, but they're all indictable, so that's the situation.
Now you have a very unique story about how this film came to be. A little different than I think a lot of the film directors here in the festival. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your work with Ringling College and how this came to be?
Yeah, I'm the department head of digital filmmaking at Ringling College, and I was collaborating with Andre Malayev Babel at the Oslo Conservatory for actor training. And he and I got to thinking, wouldn't it be great to use our respective students and see if we couldn't give them the experience of making a feature film?
Give them the first-hand, on-job experience.
Exactly, but we didn't have a story. And so it was a couple of years before actually my daughter came up with that story idea, that concept. But you know what? It worked really well because it gave an ensemble. It gave us the ability to create an ensemble, and we wanted to involve as many Oslo actors as we could. And so anybody who wanted to be in it from the Oslo third year graduating class was welcome.
Fantastic.
And they were asked, however, to come up with their own character. Why not?
Yeah.
And then I listened, and then I orchestrated each of the characters into relationships and character arcs, relationship arcs, conflicts, and out of that came essentially the plot. And then I wrote the screenplay based on.
So it was scripted. It wasn't.
It was eventually scripted, but it was very much developed with the actors in mind from the very beginning. I had them in my mind. I pictured them as I wrote each and every one's dialogue, and so that allowed me to basically write the screenplay very quickly. I wrote it in 2 weeks.
Fantastic.
But that was because a lot of work had been done, and they gave me a lot, and I knew who I was writing for.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, what was the experience directing your students as crew?
Well, that's always an interesting situation because they were going from being my students to essentially being my crew. And this was we did this as professionally as we possibly could, like a real world experience. And so it took them a little bit of getting used to my not being their teacher, my not being there to support them, but
not being their friend necessarily.
Not exactly, but us all being there to serve this movie, the story of this film. And so it took a little bit of time to kind of find our new roles vis-a-vis our old relationships. But then that started working out, and I was very, very impressed with the students. They were able to, manage the long hours and the heat and, their responsibilities, and we came up with a movie.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like the difference between telling someone what it's like at 2 in the morning in a parking lot with bugs dive bombing 10K lights and actually experiencing it with the sleep deprivation yourself.
There you go. And you have it exactly. It's a situation, it's trial by fire.
Yes.
I always call, filmmaking's not glamorous, and our students are learning that firsthand.
That's wonderful. Are there plans to do this again?
Do it again. Well, we would have to find another idea, another project. I would love it if eventually one of our students could actually come up and write it and even direct it, or another student direct it. I'm looking for that day, and so we'll see.
That sounds fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like our audiences to know? And actually, what would you like we hope audiences will take from The Lucky Six?
Well, there's a couple of things. It was not made with any kind of commercial intentions for distribution or cable or television or theatrical. That was not ever part of the thought process in creating the project. It was all about just creating a real world feature-length experience. So what I hope people can start to take away is, I'll tell you a quick story.
Love it. That's what we're here for.
When I first moved to New York, I got hired as a still photographer to do a film, a Brian De Palma film. And Brian De Palma had been asked to teach a course, a filmmaking course, at his alma mater, Sarah Lawrence College.
Yes.
And he realized very quickly he wasn't a teacher and that he was a filmmaker. He made films. So why not, as part of the course, make a feature film? So they wrote the screenplay kind of as a group. It was his story. It was Brian's story, but they wrote it as a group. And there were, I think, were the 13 students in that class. And they then went into the summer and made the film. Now they had Kirk Douglas in it. He brought some real actors. He brought real crew. And I was, as I said, the on-set still photographer for this project. So I got to meet everybody and watch that process. And I was fascinated at how that experience demystified that strange and unknowable world of making a feature film for students. And out of that class, a number of major filmmakers came out. Just 13 students, mind you, but because they'd had this experience over the years.
Well,
and this was,
you've got to name names now.
The name of the movie was called Home Movies. It was made, I believe, in 1983.
Yes.
And people like Mark Romanek, who you may have known from 1 Hour Photo.
Yes.
He was part of that crew. Steve Fierberg, he was part of that crew. He ended up doing the DP of Entourage, many other films. Mark Rossman, who does a lot of Disney films.
Yes.
So Gloria Norris, who is a writer, worked with Scorsese, worked with Woody Allen.
Right.
She was part of this group, and I just thought, wow, this is something interesting. I mean, the movie wasn't a great film, but it wasn't necessarily designed ever to be a Brian De Palma commercial Carrie, or any of his other big films. It was more about giving these students an experience. In fact, they had the young Keith Gordon, who does the Dexter television shows now, and he also has a terrific theatrical feature resume as well.
He does.
So
He starred in Christine for Joan Carpenter, probably where people might recognize him from. Absolutely.
And went on to write and direct The Chocolate War, and did very well with that.
Yes.
And worked with Robert Downey Jr. on Singing Detective, his theatrical version of that. So
is that your hope then, that the students who participated with you on this will,
and that's my
20 years from now, will be reminiscing about when they were with you?
Exactly. That was what I was trying for. Yeah.
Well, that's a wonderful intention. It's a wonderful movie. Thank you for sharing our time.
Thank you, Scott.